Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Darren, and I'm a fourth year medical student studying at Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. Today we'll be talking about image analysis, which is a part of argument analysis and English as a whole. You may be starting image analysis in your mid-high school years, or maybe you're preparing for your argument analysis SAC in year 12. If you're looking for a video that's about argument analysis more generally, feel free to check out this video, which I made 3 years ago, where I look at one of my essays and talk about what I included and what I worked on in my intro and the body of the essay. But for today, we'll be focusing specifically on image analysis, and the video will be split into two parts. In the first part, I'll be talking about my approach to image analysis. So what am I thinking about when I see an image? And in the second part, we'll be going through some examples together. Enjoy. First, let's talk about what I'm thinking when I see an image. To start off with, it's important to identify what form of image the image is. What I mean by that is it a photograph? Is it an illustration? Is it a cartoon? They sometimes give you that in the context, but it's really nice to be able to just say that throughout your analysis rather than just repeating image over and over again. It adds a little bit of specificity. After that, in terms of what exactly to analyze, you might have different mnemonics, or your teacher might have taught you a certain acronym to use, and that's fine. So maybe your teacher taught you to look at the angle, then the positioning, then the lighting, then the objects, then the people, some kind of acronym there. And if that works for you, that's fine as well. What I do is I look at every single thing that's in the image, and then I think about why it's there. I try and link it to the article and the author's purpose. This means that I usually find a lot more features than I actually need. And then through a lot of practice, I kind of know which ones are the main ones. So the obvious features that everyone will pick out, but they're pretty solid and effective. The ones that are maybe interesting, so not many people will pick out, and maybe they have really a unique analysis that I can add as well. The more flavorful ones. And then there may be ones that are a bit of a stretch, so not likely. So when I think of the why, it's like, yeah, it could be, but it's not that strong. Or maybe the ones that are less valuable, so I just don't have the time. What usually happens is with this approach, you can see when I go through the images later, and you can give it a go as well yourself first, but I look at everything that's there and I usually have more than I need. So very rarely am I sitting there thinking about what could I possibly analyze. Usually I have quite a few, and then I can kind of know which ones are the main ones, which ones are interesting, which ones I won't end up using in my actual analysis. And it's really important that you always, whenever you pick out a feature and whenever you give it a go in the future, to think of the why as well. I know that sometimes things are maybe they're not on purpose because you don't really know what the illustrator was planning. It may be unlikely that they had every single little feature planned out. But when you analyze an image, try and assume that everything is there for the purpose of the author and try and link it in somewhere there. So after the seeing, what's there and why, that's kind of the bulk of me looking at the image. And when I can't think of anything more, or if my brain is not functioning that well and I just want something easy to go back to, I kind of just consider the camera angle and the positioning. They're kind of very general things that I don't think about that much, but it just gives you a pretty accessible and easy point to think about. So kind of a go-to or like a sort of background thought. So I just look at it, I just think, what's the camera angle? What's the positioning? All right, let's jump into some examples then. First, let's have a look at this image. This is taken from the Tesla website, and it's the second image on their website. So when I'm looking at what's there and why, when I'm identifying those features, there are two principles that can help. One is to think about what's most obvious. So it's just a nice starting point. So what's the most obvious features? What do you see there in the image? And think about why it's there. Next is for when I'm a little bit stuck or when I want to think of some more interesting features, I think about describing the image to someone who can't see. And if you wanted to describe this image to someone who can't see, and you wanted them to imagine the image exactly as you see it, exactly as it's there on the page, what would you say? And some of the things you will use in those descriptions are good points to analyze. So looking at this image, what's most obvious is this Tesla car here. And it's blue, it's in the center of the page. Those are kind of features that stand out to me. So blue, center of the page. Why? Well, it kind of places the focus on it. They're selling this car, so it kind of makes sense that it'd be in the middle of the page. Blue doesn't really have that much of a significance. The other point I would recognize about it is that the wheels are spinning. So why are the wheels spinning? If I had to think of a why, that would be playing into the idea of kind of innovation, moving forwards, and gives it a bit more life. Like this car is kind of, going, it's working. The other part that really stands out to me is the background of this image. And the background of this image is pretty kind of pale and has a white hue over it. So why does it have this white hue and why is it pale? So I think it has two purposes. One, helps you really focus on the car because your eyes are attracted to the blue in the center. But also I think it gives it a more kind of sleek and clean look as well. And also a bit closer at the background, if I had to describe it to someone, you can see that there are kind of mountains or trees, but it's a very expansive background. So why is it expansive? I think it gives it a very comfortable look and a very expansive and kind of freedom. Gives a sense of freedom as well. You can see the sky is very clear, takes up half of the page. The other half, you have these kind of mountains and hills in the background. So kind of adventure and freedom. The other point about the car is that it's traveling away from you. Why might it be traveling away from you? Or maybe the photographer just took the photo in this position. But to link it to the text, I might consider that it gives a sense of zooming away, which ties in with the wheels spinning and gives a sense of life and kind of energy as well. Those are the main points from the image. Some minor points are like the number plate, it's not there. Why? Well, places the focus on the car itself. You can see the Tesla symbol as well. Maybe that's also why the car is tilted forwards. And there's no driver, once again placing the focus on the car. So you can see from this that those are points that I may not use, but I think it's still useful identifying them. It's good practice. And then you'd analyze the words as well here. I won't go into too much detail, but briefly, like Model Y, Order Now, Test Drive. I think the font is all pretty simple and kind of clean, which is the whole look it seems that this photograph is going for. So clean, simple, and it places focus on the important parts. So what's the car? Model Y. This button, Order Now. This button, Test Drive. So very simple instructions, not too crowded at all. And that'd be my analysis for this Tesla image. Now let's have a look at this second image here. And this photograph was taken from The Age, one of the articles from The Age. I was just looking through the news articles and this was one of the ones that popped up. So I don't know that much about the article either, but I think the title gives us enough information. He was one of Victoria's top homicide detectives. Working too hard cost him the job he loved. And now let's have a look at the photo. So what stands out to me? Well, you have the guy and he's older and he's wearing a hoodie and a t-shirt. So that comes under describing him to someone. And so what's the significance of that? So people can't change the fact they're older or old, but you can imagine how some people you might have seen on TV who are maybe similar ages to this guy, but they can present themselves through the photographs as much younger, as energetic, as brimming with life. But I would say this photo looks quite like a normal photograph you might take at a meal. It looks very candid and honest. So why might that be? Why is he kind of looks very normal in this photo? Why is there no sort of attempt to make him seem so energetic? Well, I would say that might play into a bit of sympathy. And makes him more relatable as well. So this is older, normal person. And why is he wearing a hoodie and a t-shirt? Because he's a homicide detective. Maybe he's wearing a suit. But why is he wearing these, very normal clothing? And once again, I think it plays into that kind of emotional appeal. Wants us to empathize with him. And may even play into the idea that he no longer has a job as well, because he's not wearing his detective garments. The other obvious part is the background. So what about the background? So it looks like it's in a cafe, or one of my students said in a mall. So cafe. Actually, I'll use this color. So cafe or mall. Why might that be? Well, I think it kind of normalizes the situation, makes him seem like an everyday person you might meet, makes him seem like a very normal everyday citizen, like someone's father or someone's grandpa. And that kind of helps the argument's case to draw sympathy for him. So the very normal civilian environment. And my student picked out as well that maybe that's also to show that he no longer has a job. The other point is that if you had to describe this entire environment to someone who couldn't see, one of the points you might say is that this place is completely empty. Usually at a cafe or a mall, you might feel that there are some people there. And maybe there were in some other photographs they took that day, but in this particular photograph, there's no one in the background. Why? Well, I think that may be giving off a sense of loneliness, isolation, and isolation as well. And then if I go back to the sort of very basic things like the angle and the positioning, or he's in the middle and he's positioned right at us. And actually when I think about it, it's kind of like he's at eye level and we're sitting across the table from him, or even a little bit closer. So he's in the middle, eye level. And I think that's a very strong appeal. They haven't chosen one where he's in a position of power, or if he's particularly weak either. Just a very normal person. But when we look at him, this is a position that might bring out really strong emotional connections because he's at eye level and it's almost like we're sitting across from him. And then if I look at his facial expression as well, and I wanted to describe his facial expression, it looks neutral, slightly sad. In the context of this piece, I might say he looks a bit lost as well. He doesn't look driven and he has an exact purpose. He looks like someone who may have worked pretty hard. Oops. So neutral, slightly sad, lost. And that can play in the idea of why this image of him is quite honest and looks like an everyday photograph. That could also play into that kind of being lost, or his job has been taken from him. That kind of atmosphere, because it's a bit of a contrast, right, to Top Homicide Detective. This image with Top Homicide Detective. So these are the main features that I would analyze in this photograph. Finally, let's look at this photograph here. And with this photograph, I wanted to illustrate something a little bit different. And that's the idea that all images that you analyze will support the author's argument. So images support the author's argument. That seems pretty obvious, but sometimes the image might not do that in a very conventional way. And when that happens, you might be thrown off, but as long as you think about the fact that the image is there to support the author's argument, and then pick out the what features are there and really try and link them through the why to the purpose of the article, then you'll be able to figure it out. So this piece is actually the one that I used, or the one that my piece that I analyzed 3 years ago was based on. And you can have a read of it there. But if we just look at this picture first, we have this Apple store. Looks pretty nice, pretty modern. Looks like a normal Apple store. The Apple symbol, pretty clearly showing it's an Apple store. It's gold, and you can see, a lot of people around as well. So it looks like a pretty nice image of an Apple store. And then when you consider the article, right, the context of the article is that Apple wanted to build this store in Federation Square. And the author's argument was that this was a terrible idea, that building this store represents making the Federation Square into a business, putting commercial buildings into this cultural environment is not good. It's harming the culture and destroying the integrity of Federation Square. All right, so that's not what the image exactly looks like. But now we need to think about it in the context of the article. And the article itself helps a bit as well, because it mentions things like gold-rimmed Apple Store. But essentially, if you think about this image overall, rather than now being a support of Apple and being how nice it is, and I think this picture was actually taken from Apple's website for this article, which is an interesting point. Here it's actually being used to subvert Apple's goals. So it's using all the strengths that are the most obvious points you will see in this picture, but actually turning them and saying that these are not good and these are weaknesses and harming Federation Square. So if we look at the golden frame and how modern the building looks, I wouldn't in an Apple piece, I might say that it looks really aesthetic, highlights how modern and innovative Apple is. Here though, you would probably say it looks artificial and out of place. Especially when you might notice now that there's that black building at the back. It doesn't really seem to fit in with that black building there. Right? It looks really different and a bit jarring as well. And then if you look at the people in the front who we were talking about, it's a bit hard to analyze, right? But you can also argue that the people there may not be there to see the Apple store. Like, it's still not that popular because the majority of people are not there for the purpose of the Apple store. Now, or you might say that they're taking up a lot of ground in this square. Like, it kind of looks a bit weird. They've set up these chairs on the ground there. sort of, that can come into the idea of, commercial invasion of Federation Square. So turning this into like, a kind of a classic, sightseeing, you sit there, tourist destination. Commercial invasion of Federation Square. So you can tie that into there. And if I look at the picture even more, you can see that the building kind of stands out even more when you compare it to things like, the grass around it and the building. It just looks a bit out of place and stuck out. And so for the purposes of this article, those are the features that I'll be focusing on. So that's the main point I wanted to make with this photograph. Just beware that sometimes the photograph, you might see the photograph and be confused about how it relates to the article, but just take some time to think through it and link the features and just really believe that every little feature in that image is there to support the article. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, enjoy your studying, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.